because of the political monoculture of the not just the citizens, but those who are in government, that it seems like they're turning a blind eye to far left violence.
Hello and welcome to TRIGGERnometry. I'm Francis Foster.
I'm Konstantin Kisin.
And this is the show for you if you're bored with people arguing on the internet over subjects they know nothing about. At TRIGGERnometry, we don't pretend to be the experts, we ask the experts.
Our fantastic guest this week you might recognize if you came to see my Edinburgh show. He's an American journalist and, welcome to TRIGGERnometry.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
For anyone who doesn't know you, which is an increasingly small number of people these days, just tell us, who are you, how are you where you are, what's been your journey through life?
Most recently became infamous, or depending on the audience, famous for being the victim of an Antifa beating and robbery in Portland, Oregon. I cover demonstrations there quite frequently, and it was on the 29th of June that I was attacked, and part of that was caught on video, and I was left with a brain injury from that attack. And we're now, as of this recording, over 2 months since that incident, and there hasn't been a single arrest.
Mm. And one of the arguments that was used by some people inexplicably to me to defend these people beating you up was that you are right wing, and that somehow entitles people to beat you up as a journalist. So, and you have said that you are right of center. So I wanted just to explore what that means. Not that that would in any way justify anyone attacking you, of course. So where are you politically? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was Joe Rogan who asked me if there was, I think he asked if there was a gun put at your head and you had to answer it, how would you? And that was the first time I said right of center. I think I've avoided labels for a long time, but I guess if I had to pick, I picked what I said because the positions that I have that are important to me, I think, have been more so aligned with the right, at least in the American context. For example, I'm patriotic. I'm very thankful that the United States provided refuge to my parents who are political refugees. And in the US now, that is seen as a conservative or right-wing position to have gratitude for citizenship and thanking America for what it is, for the freedoms that it protects, right? So there's that. There's also my parents' experience with escaping communism makes me not have the luxury of viewing Antifa and other revolutionary far left movements with the same rose-colored glasses. So I am very critical of Antifa, as anybody who follows my work knows, and I've written critically about Marxism as well. So just because of, I would say it's those two main things that it's been easy for people to label me as a conservative writer. If they're being charitable, they're being more, they're more trying to delegitimize me or smear me. They'll say that I'm a far-right person.
So you mentioned about Antifa. Now, Antifa is something that I've only recently become aware of. Who are Antifa and what do they want to achieve?
It's a movement that began in Europe, particularly in Germany, in the years post-World War II. The subculture that it grows out of is anti-racist punk scene. And the American version of it is, as we know today, a very recent phenomenon. So I have much more knowledge on the US version of it compared to the older German or Western European versions. In the US, it's had some type of presence in some progressive cities like Portland since the 2000s, but it became a much more mainstream thing from 2016 going forward. I mean, just rewinding a few years, nobody expected Donald Trump to win, and Portland is a extremely progressive city. I explain to outsiders that it's basically what the SJW ethics and ethos of a university mainstreamed into entire city and through city government. So we had 3 days of protests that devolved into rioting in November 2016. And that was the first time that I saw Black Bloc Antifa. They were going around in their masks and black outfits and destroying property and starting fires in the street. And because Trump continues to be such a polarizing figure and a lightning rod for fear-mongering on the left, him and his administration has been a very powerful propaganda win for Antifa. So now they are able to point to him or various things in his policies or things that are done in his administration as evidence of ascendant and rising fascism. And it's pulled in a large number of people. I mean, it's still a fringe movement, but it's grown now to a point where the city and the public can no longer ignore. So that's why footage in Portland keeps going viral of these brawls on the street that look almost comical from a, if you're watching the videos, they look outrageous, but like people, innocent people, regular citizens get caught up in it. And it's my perception that because of the political monoculture of the, not just the citizens, but those who are in government, that it seems like they're turning a blind eye to far left violence. And Portland's political structure is unique in that our mayor is also our police commissioner. So you can see the conflict of interest there, and he's up for re-election. So there's just all these variables coming together is what you see, what caused kind of what happened to me. And I wasn't the only victim. There's been others before me. There'll be those after me. And just through the course of my speaking up about the far left militancy that's happening, not just in my city, but in that particular region of America, the Pacific Northwest, I've been targeted quite a bit in the left-wing media.
And before we touch on what happened to your assault, what is it that they want to achieve? Are they socialists? Do they want to overthrow the government, introduce and put in a socialist government? Are they communists? What are they?
Antifa is a movement. I don't ever describe them as an organization, and some people, because they're not too informed in it, describe them as a group. They're not. It's an ideology that is made up of many groups, and some of them are ad hoc. So, it could be something as a group, Antifa group that forms in opposition to an event that's happening a certain weekend or a conference or something that they oppose. Portland is a bit different, that we do kind of have an Antifa organization called Rose City Antifa that's been around since 2007, and they have Twitter, Facebook, an online store. So they operate much more as a formal organization, and they were the ones who claimed responsibility for my attack. It's a movement made up of...
Wait, Andy, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Hold on. So this organization that exists, that has a physical address, that has a store, right?
It's an online store.
Online store, okay. But presumably we know who they are, right?
No, we don't.
We don't.
They're entirely
Okay.
anonymous.
Okay.
But we can track it through a bank account.
Well, I imagine if the police were interested enough, they could find out at least some of the people who are connected. So they claimed responsibility for beating you up, and yet, I presume, they haven't been arrested, they haven't been tracked down, they haven't been prosecuted. Is that right?
Correct.
And why is that?
Well, I actually don't know. I speculate that it's because of his lack of political will in Portland to prosecute Antifa, because they have quite a lot of support in the city. I have my own legal team that's funded through a legal fund. I was taken on as a client for Publius Lex, which is a civil rights nonprofit. And it's my view that my civil rights were violated in that me just working as a journalist, documenting things happening in a public space, have been continually attacked and intimidated, and more recently left with a serious injury, and that the policing tactics don't change, and they just continually allow citizens to get assaulted. It's through that legal fund and my own legal team that we're doing our own investigations to see what we can find because it does seem like there are systemic issues in Portland, that it's not just isolated incidents of street violence, but I mean, this has been going on for years now, and very, very few people ever get held accountable.
And that, to me, it just seems so bizarre and ridiculous, because you were seriously assaulted. I mean, I don't know the American term, the British term would say probably GBH, grievous bodily harm, of which someone would go to prison for 6 months to a year. And the fact that there doesn't seem to be any willingness to investigate, have they opened an investigation about what happened?
There's an ongoing investigation, but the Portland police aren't keeping me updated on where they're at.
And the one thing that I found quite upsetting, and I'm on the left, is the lack of sympathy that I saw from people on the left to what happened to you, as if, oh, you know, he's on the right, therefore he sort of deserves it, which I found to be abhorrent and an absolute callousness.
Yeah, I think, like, you know, one of your questions earlier was like, what do Antifa want? It's a coalition made up of radical, extreme communists and anarchists, and they really believe that they're at the vanguard of some revolution, and that there's going to be a cosmic battle with the fascists, and that they are going to be the ones who will be leading the anti-fascist side. It's beyond that, which sounds outrageous. There is a more coherent political theory behind it. You know, I focus on Antifa, but I don't think they're like an existential threat to American democracy or anything. And in the United States, as well as this country, have developed democracies. There's no way that a small fringe movement can take over the country. However, that doesn't mean that Antifa can't find success through other ways. And I think what we're seeing in the US is that one of their goals is really to normalize political violence. And that used to not be a partisan issue in the US, but now it has become, in that there are many mainstream politicians and thinkers and commentators on the left who have the view that if somebody has or is accused of having abhorrent views, they must be shut down by any means necessary. And that's actually one of the Antifa groups that adopt that name, by any means necessary. So it can be through shutting them down, through doxing them, intimidating them, through assaulting them, and then, if need be, something like what happened to me. So there's been a lot of disinformation and misinformation about me that have come from Antifa supporters, and that they really believe that I am a far-right threat to them. And
we'll get to that in a moment, Andy, but actually none of that matters. If you're a journalist, even if you were a right-wing journalist who was there to misrepresent part of that, still doesn't entitle people to beat you up. That's not how civilized society works. And the biggest problem, of course, with all of this is that if violence is legitimized by one side, what you're then doing is you're sending a message that violence is acceptable. What do you think the genuine far right, which does exist as a small fringe, what are they going to do? And as we know, they are probably better at violence than the far left. So I don't think it in any way it matters what your political opinions are actually for whether this was legitimate or not. It's just not legitimate. And you know, you talked about it being comical initially, or being seen as comical by outsiders. I remember watching, prior to your incident, footage of these Antifa protesters in Portland blocking off streets and directing traffic. And then an old guy in his car being kind of, he tried to drive through and he was assaulted and all this stuff. And the police standing there at the back just watching this whole thing. And anyone with any sense could see that would then lead to Antifa becoming emboldened. So how much of it is, as you say, the lack of political will in the city that has encouraged these people to feel like they can run around beating people up?
You know, I mean, it would be just speculation at this point, but my observation is what happens at these things is, these demonstrations, is police will be on the periphery always, within eyesight of sometimes the violence and things that happened before the violence. So, like on May Day, what happened to me was that I had been punched in the stomach, and I reported it immediately to police who were just several yards away. And the response then, and I could still point out the suspect who was masked, but still within eyesight, the response then, as it's been every time, is that we will not approach, speak to, confront, or detain a suspect because it could incite the crowd. So Antifa and other far-left militants have basically been given a blueprint. It's like if we as a mob promise violence, then the police just won't intervene. And that video that you talked about, that where they shut down the traffic in the street, that happens was actually quite routinely in Portland. Like, it's almost to the point now where like the violence on the streets is the banality, and people don't even, like, just 2 weeks ago in Portland, the city was bracing for some major demonstrations, and the fact that nobody was killed but several people were injured, that was seen as a success in the city, and it was described as peaceful, which was shocking to me. Some of the video you've seen of people taking out concrete and throwing it at a bus that was trying to leave. I mean, you know, my detractors keep bringing up that, but these are the far right, they're extreme, they're white supremacists, whatever. You know, what happened that day is, regardless of whatever views these people have within the bus, they were trying to leave the demonstration, and they were leaving in the area, and they were prevented from leaving because traffic was shut down because of people in the street. And then these people rushed the bus, and then there was this footage with the hammer and them people spraying bear mace inside the bus as they were driving off. Like, to me, it's almost like the views here are irrelevant. It's like this action of this violence where people are not just condoning it, but cheering them on because it's
people they don't like.
Yes.
It's people they don't like on the bus. But how much truth is in this idea that it's essentially two groups of extremists coming together to fight each other? Because they are, whenever I see Antifa being written about in the media, it's always they are counter-protesters. So the setup is that they are protesting against other people who've come to Portland to spread the hateful far-right ideas. How much truth is there to that?
There is some truth to that, but more often than not, what happens is some type of right-wing or conservative group will announce that they are holding some type of event in Portland. It can be something as simple as a small rally or holding American flags. The left-wing activists and Antifa will view that as a provocation and organize to come into, they say, defend our communities, but in the language of Antifa, what that really means is come to physically confront them. So there's that. Sometimes what happens is that some of the right-wing groups will go to an event that Antifa has organized to, they would say they're going there just to watch or listen to observe peacefully. Antifa views that as provocation. So, I mean, it's not like both sides are equally to blame or both sides are equally blameless. But what I see is that it's more so one side being unable to accept that there's this small group of people who have opposing views, who want to speak openly, like they can't tolerate that because they do believe that their ideas are so dangerous that if we give them an inch, what we will have is the Holocaust again, essentially. So they use a lot of language from the interwar years. They adopt the symbols of the anti-fascists from that time because they really think that they are part of that legacy of from the interwar years in Europe. It's delusional. It's outrageous, and it would be funny if innocent people didn't get caught up in their violence.
And Andy, how much responsibility do you think Trump needs to take for the fact that Antifa have grown because of the use of his rhetoric in his political rallies, referring to people as sons of bitches, Mexican immigrants, using the word rapists? And does he not have to take some responsibility for the fact that this hard left have become emboldened?
Well, Antifa's issues is with Trump, but primarily they take it out on his supporters. So, I mean, in the US and actually all around the world, we've been discussing for years now problems with Trump's rhetoric. And I don't, I feel like it's the same conversation over and over of like, he said something offensive, he said something that he didn't walk back very well, and that we're just going to be angry and upset about it, and we're going to go out to the streets and demonstrate. I think what I appreciate about him speaking out more now about Antifa is that it's bringing attention more to this extremist movement. I, of course, at the same time, we all have to recognize that it's not just his things that he's said, but I think his lack of action in being a good unifier has driven more of this polarization in America, which in turn does empower Antifa as well as fringe elements on the right. And so, but I think at the end of the day, it's about holding people accountable for their own actions rather than, I just think it's too tenuous of an argument to say that Trump is a radicalizing figure.
But would you not? So, for instance, if you're a Latino person and you live in America and you hear him use those words, and you're especially a young man of a certain age and certainly being impressionable, would that not radicalize you? I could feel that I would be very angry at it and maybe want to protest against it or get upset and feel that the American president does not want to represent me.
See, the only problem with the argument is Antifa are incredibly white, right? That's
yes.
They posted the mugshots of all the people arrested. They're all white.
Oh, are they?
Yeah. So I understand your argument, but it doesn't seem to be borne out. I'm guessing most of these people are middle-class vegans or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yes, so the demographics of Antifa, at least in Portland, well, actually in other cities like DC or Berkeley, whatever, predominantly white, they will try to elevate like the few individuals who I think they use them as tokens, they're a trans person of color or they're a disabled person, to put them at the front of the line, where Black Bloc will stand behind them. I mean, it's just for optics.
Every corporation does it, Andy, regardless, Republican, Democrat.
Yeah. But I mean, in response to your question, I think there's nothing wrong with protesting. That's part of the American spirit. But like, what Antifa and the allies are doing it's not lawful protesting. It's shutting down the streets. They call it direct action, physical confrontations with people, and the label and the type of people that they sometimes do genuinely go against, oppose true far-right figures, but because those number of people are really small and they need a constant threat to not only give themselves meaning, but to recruit other people, they've expanded very, very broadly who they consider a fascist or fascist supporting or Nazi, in that, now it encompasses people like me, for example. So it's like, and then the things that they do are criminal. And so there are many issues with Donald Trump. I don't think that I'm not sure now at this point if he was just taken out of the picture, if Antifa would just go away. It would be definitely harder for them to recruit. But many aspects of their ideology are basically have been mainstreamed by some of our politicians, like AOC, for example, the demonization of law enforcement, even just delegitimizing the concept of sovereignty in the US. So there's been, in the past 2 months, 4 incidents of immigration customs enforcement facilities being targeted, and one of them was by an Antifa militant in the state of Washington, close to Portland, where one of them firebombed the facility, tried to ignite a 500-gallon propane tank, and came down with a rifle. He got killed before he killed anybody, but he left behind a manifesto. I'd actually crossed paths with him before. So like
And that was massively underreported, by the way.
it was. So like the street hooliganism on the street is one aspect of it, but it's the ideology itself is very extreme. I mean, it's like revolution by any means necessary, and we will take up arms. And you know, the shooter, the mass shooter in Ohio recently, he didn't leave behind a manifesto as far as we know, but at least his social media footprint can give us a clue on his views. And he was he was a part of Antifa in that he attended the demonstrations in his state, expressed support for their views. And so I'm not sure if we can even really say that that there's no body count on the Antifa side anymore. I mean, we'll see what the investigation finds, but you know, we don't know anything about the Ohio shooter's ideology beyond his social media, and he did leave a very extensive history of support for violent far-left militancy.
And why do you think? Because when I was on holiday and I saw both of the shootings which happened in quick succession, and the first one, I think it was in Texas?
Yes.
So the first one was in Texas, and obviously happened to a Latin American community, and it was awful, of course it was. And then there was another one that happened, and that didn't seem to get as much press.
It didn't.
Or that might have been just what happened in Europe and the way the BBC presented it, because the BBC pushed forward the one that happened in Texas, and that one, it seemed to be swept under the carpet. Is that fair to say? Or?
It for sure received less attention. I mean, there were fewer fatalities in Ohio shooting, but still 9 people were killed. That's a lot. And so I think, you know, it's about media narratives. It's the fact that the El Paso shooter in Texas was targeting Mexicans, and he left behind a manifesto where his ideas create easy headlines, for example, because he had xenophobic views. Like, it's much easier to sensationalize that type of story and make people go crazy on social media, whereas the Ohio shooter was a bit more complicated in that he didn't leave behind a right-wing manifesto in his social media account. Certainly didn't show him being sympathetic to white supremacy or anything like that. Quite the contrary. So I think ideology has a lot to do with that. I mean, you see it often when criminal violent acts are committed by somebody who is part of a historically marginalized community. There's, I think with journalists, they don't want to focus too much on it because they're always afraid of how it could negatively impact the perception of the community. Whereas if that suspect or criminal is a white man, particularly if he is seen as potentially conservative anyways, then it's a free-for-all. So that's just the nature of the media in the United States as well as this country.
And how much do you think this is about language? Because we've had a number of people on this show talking about, you know, in Britain, Brexit voters being called Nazis, being milkshaked, pro-Brexit politicians being called Nazis, being milkshaked. How much of this do you think is about the fact that if you keep calling everyone Nazis, there will be some people who eventually actually believe it? And then, I mean, look, if I thought that there were genuine Nazis coming, right, well, I probably would use violence to try and defend myself. Do you know what I mean? So how much of it is about we've managed to persuade ourselves that there's this horde of Nazis coming for all of us, and some of these people are now buying into that idea when the reality wouldn't suggest that?
You know, I think it would be easier for me to step back and just sort of accept that the nature of ad hominem insults is like, you know, constantly trying to outdo the other. And so, like, if Nazis had just remained an insult and stayed that was used as part of this rhetoric, then that's one thing. But what happened is that Punch a Nazi became a meme that was quite celebrated. And, you know, like, Richard Spencer is an easy person for people to hate, but then, like as I said a moment ago, the definition of Nazi has become kind of meaningless now, and so it's just applied very, very broadly. And there's people now who think, well, if this person's a Nazi, it's okay to punch him or her, right? Or do something worse. So language has something to do with it, but I think it's more so that the actions now are the response to people you dislike, like shutting them down through violent acts is seen as acceptable. I mean, it was in this country that milkshaking became this new phenomenon that very quickly crossed the Atlantic. And it was pretty much universally celebrated by your chattering classes, as well as the American ones too. I mean, it was basically described, the American left-wing punditry, as a cute form of political dissent. But we can saw how quickly that slippery slope, right? And like what happened to me that day, the milkshaking served a particular purpose, primarily one, to mark me as a target for everybody else in the crowd, because there are many people who knew my name and my writings but didn't know my face. So, you know, that literally, yeah, it's like a big arrow direct to me once I have all that stuff on me. And then secondly, it blinds you as well when it goes in your face and your eyes and you can't even see. So it's very insidious, and I am concerned that there's, like, it should really, you know, in developed liberal democracies, like, political violence should be something that's universally condemned, but now it's not. It's kind of like you hear a lot of, I don't support violence, but these people are X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah.
So,
oh, it's despicable, and we talked about it at the time with many people. I mean, the idea that you can go around throwing stuff at people because you don't agree with them is not what a democracy is, and it should be condemned by everybody, irrespective of whether you agree with the people or not. And the fact that a lot of people felt very comfortable with that, that was deeply troubling to me. Just the milkshaking alone, what happened to you is obviously incredibly serious and much more clearly defined. But I've always said that, you know, attacking someone by throwing the milkshake at them, they don't know what's in that cup. They don't know. And so the whole point of it is you're scaring the person, and they don't know what that liquid is. It could be acid. It could be anything. And, you know, of course it's intimidation. It's designed specifically to prevent people from speaking. It's political violence designed to shut down discussion. That's what it is. Guys, we wanted to tell you we're very excited to say we've got a new sponsor, which is HelloFresh.
Indeed we have. HelloFresh is the UK's leading recipe box service, delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and step-by-step recipes to your door.
It is the easy, convenient way to cook delicious dinners from scratch every single time.
Choose your favourites from 19 recipes every week.
They have a whole range of options there for you, including recipes that are ready in under 20 minutes. There's family favourites, there's British cuisine, there's world cuisine.
HelloFresh are offering TRIGGERnometry fans £60 off 4 boxes.
To take advantage of that, go to hellofresh.co.uk, enter our special code, which is of course TRIGGERnometry, and enjoy delicious dinners without any of the drama.
The fresh ingredients come direct from suppliers, i.e. they've been picked by Constantine's family.
You can tell Francis studied geography at a British school because you can't tell the difference between Russia and Romania.
Doesn't matter, mate. Same thing. Brexit means Brexit. And the great thing is, it's been pre-portioned for you, so there's no food waste, just like in my home country of Venezuela. The great thing with HelloFresh is that you're going to be able to choose from 19 different recipes every week. So there is something for everybody. You're going to be able to eat with your kids. There's going to be no fuss. Dinner time is going to be solved.
Yeah, I really like the Rapid Box, which allows you to cook things in under 20 minutes. But the great thing about HelloFresh as well is it actually allows you to open up your cooking range. So most households on average have about 6 recipes that they cook regularly. HelloFresh has up to 19, so you can kind of expand a little bit in terms of your cooking. And of course, they also don't have a fixed subscription, so there's no term. You can cancel, you can skip weeks, you can change the size of the box, you can change delivery address, you can do all kinds of stuff to suit your life. To enjoy delicious moments, head over to hellofresh.co.uk, choose your box, choose your delivery slot, and add your favorite recipes.
Discover the easy way to get delicious dinners from scratch. And if you do that, you'll get sick abs just like me. HelloFresh are offering TRIGGERnometry fans £60 off 4 boxes.
To take advantage of that, go to hellofresh.co.uk, enter our special code, which is of course TRIGGERnometry, and enjoy delicious dinners without any of the drama. So let's talk about some of the stuff that's happened more recently, because one of the things that we know now is that there was some criticism of you and an attempt to present you in a particular light. And I wanted to speak to you about that and see what you had to say about it, because there was this video released. It's an 18-minute video. I found it quite boring and difficult to watch. But basically, if I can represent what is being said about it, and then you can say what you think about it, and correct me if any of my thing is not accurate to what people are saying, right? What I think people are saying is you were walking together with a right-wing group of is it Patriot Prayer, right? Who were planning to attack a bar in which these Antifa people hang out, and you were participating or at least observing a conversation in which they were planning this violent attack. And people have used that to essentially say, Andy Ngo is not an objective journalist. What he is someone who hates Antifa, so he records all their violent crimes. But when it comes to right-wing violence, which also does exist, he doesn't record that, he doesn't present that, and therefore he presents a skewed picture. And they've then gone on to say that that's why you left Quillette. So tell us about that.
Yes, so I left Quillette a week before this latest controversy broke out. It was a mutual decision. I'm moving on to other projects. I'm going to be working on a book. Just don't have time to continue to be working with Quillette. And it's been a great experience there. I'm very thankful for the time that I've had there. Those who dislike me use that as we're trying to link it with the latest outrage, this video that's come out that some headlines describe as damning and has fueled very serious accusations against me. Actually, I think criminal accusations of criminality, in that I was party to a violent criminal conspiracy or had knowledge of it that withheld it from the authorities. It's absolutely all untrue. It's rubbish. This video, I actually encourage everybody to watch it. It's kind of like watching paint dry. It's 18 minutes. So that was recorded on the 1st of May, 2019, May Day. There were a series of demonstrations throughout the day. I had been documenting it. It was early in the day that I had been punched in the abdomen and sprayed with silly string. And so that happened all before this video started. There was a right-wing demonstration where they were holding flags over a bridge. And after that was over, they were milling around the street and walking around. I was just following them. It was really uneventful. It was actually quite boring. I was looking at my phone, which you can actually see in the video, one, to see how the other journalists had covered the protests from earlier in the day, see if there's anything else that I missed, because it was happening at different parts of the city. And I was trying to see if anybody had caught video of me getting assaulted. So that's what I was looking at and concentrated on. I only heard snippets of what these people were talking about, and none of it to me was interesting. It was like, where are we going to go? Is anybody else joining us? What's going on? So I didn't record that. It wasn't, and mind you, I need to point out, I wasn't the only photojournalist that was there. There were 3 other people, including a local left-wing journalist, by the way. So none of us found any of this interesting. There was at one point where people have said, some of the headlines have been completely false, demonstrably false if you watch the video, saying that I laughed while people were planning an attack. I never laughed in the video. There's at one point where I did give a faint smile. I recall them saying something about how they were really outnumbered. And I was just at that time thinking about, like, this is what, they're always outnumbered 10 to 1 if they're lucky. Like, this is the futility of their demonstrations in progressive Portland. And that was spun as me being approving or supportive of whatever happened next. And I don't think it was apparent to any of us there what was going to happen next, because even this video, who was recorded by an undercover Antifa activist, someone who had been undercover for 2 years, and this is like the climax of his work, right? One, it was selectively released in that he doesn't show any of what happened actually at the Antifa pub that was hosting the Antifa party. Doesn't show any of that, and that was where I was seriously assaulted there as well. And so he levied accusations against me anonymously. It's an unverified, well, one is an anonymous person, so it's an unverified source, and the fact that this he was interviewed and it went on a left-wing blog called the Portland Mercury, which is also a paper. And, you know, it's like this whole, like watching myself being smeared in real time and made into somebody I'm not has been really fascinating and kind of surreal. It's like seeing how it's a game of telephone almost. It's like, and all the players are, you know, the writers at HuffPo, Vox or Vice, and then all the Twitter checkmarks people who are kind of part of the same left-wing, scorched earth, partisan, ideological writers. And it's just like, oh, somebody said Andy was laughing when Andy's laughing in a damning video. Let's repeat that in the headlines. And over. And it just, you know, they really depend on people not watching it. What happened next in that video is that, well, I went to the bar and actually in the interview with this anonymous Antifa activist, he stopped recording at one point, not to call the police, but to call the people at the Antifa party. You know, so if he was really witnessing a violent criminal conspiracy, I wonder why he didn't call police. And this video footage, even at the very end of the interview, he said he didn't realize what he had caught until some time later before releasing it. So it wasn't apparent to him, and he was right there talking to the people, and I was walking around the area, sometimes close, mostly far away, as well as being concentrated with things on my phone, okay?
So just to be clear, what you're saying is, at no point did you feel that these people were about to go and attack someone in a bar?
I didn't have a full picture that would have led me to that conclusion, correct.
And Andy, do you think we're entering this really dangerous period now for journalism where every journalist and every journalistic publication seems to be advocacy journalism, and that people just want to push their narrative and they will twist the facts in order to suit their own narrative? And actually, what happened, the facts, nobody seems to care about anymore.
Yes, you know, and I need to, you know, self-introspection is very important to me, and integrity and all that. So I need to point out that not everything that the critics say about me are wrong. Some of it has merit. For example, just the nature of on-the-ground breaking news reporting with things that are many things happening at the same time. Sometimes, in that very moment, you may get a detail wrong. You don't have the advantage of the multiple angles that come out in the hours later, and of course, you know, basically the crowdsourcing of fact-checking of something,
so
right?
The hammer thing would be a good example, where the hammer was on the bus, but you initially mentioned it being...
I actually never described where it came from,
okay.
But in the video you do see that at one point one of the people from the Antifa side did have the hammer. I didn't know that it originally came from inside.
Yeah.
I came out and corrected the record for that, and then I released a video that I a few days later that I didn't have access to initially, that was like the full uncut that showed, you know, the group of people descending on that bus. Kind of like the whole, like there's context to that hammer being taken out, you know, like you can make an argument that potentially it was self-defense, and if you watched the unedited video, it was people from the outside who charged towards the door, by the way. So yes, there's that. I had to correct that. There was some other small details. So this is stuff that it's like, I mean, relatively small mistakes that I correct, but then they use to sort of say that everything I say is a lie. And you know, it's like, I'm just one individual working as an independent journalist, a freelance writer. You know, you see huge mistakes being done by people like on MSNBC or CNN, and they have an entire department of fact checkers and editors behind them, and they still get some mistakes. They still, it's just, so like taking cheap shots at me like that, I think is disingenuous, particularly when these writers are either in DC or New York City and not on the ground in Portland and seeing and witnessing what happens. I mean, it's just, it doesn't seem like good faith argument. But, there is some merit to it in that I have gotten things wrong that I correct. But the other smears that are coming out now that I coordinate with far-right people, it's outrageous. So there was another news story that came out in the Willamette Week, which is a local paper in Portland, and they had obtained a secret recording of, I guess, men that were inside that bus. I don't know if it was before or after that hammer thing. I think it was after. So they released that, and at one point, one of the men was talking about how Andy Ngo got beat up because he turned down the Proud Boys' offer of security. And then the commentary in a news story, not an opinion piece, by the way, a news story, was that this was evidence of me colluding with the Proud Boys. And I don't know if it's like we're reading and listening to different things, because there was an outpouring of support to me after the May Day attack, where I was sprayed with bear mace in the face and was blinded. And I had a whole bunch of people that I didn't know offer to be volunteer security if I go out and cover more protests. I turned down those offers because I wanted to maintain my own independence. And now that is used as evidence of coordination. So I don't, this whole thing seems like we're through the looking glass. I feel like, I don't know if the world's going mad or if it's me, but it's like, it's amazing that, like, for me, the victim of multiple assaults in having my dress docs. And part of the reason I'm in the UK was because there continue violent threats to myself that have been reported to police, and I just need to get far away from the US. And like, me being the victim of all that is now somehow spun around as I am like an extreme violent person who is the aggressor, who deserves all this, or was brought it on myself. It's almost like a dream. It doesn't seem like this is really reality to me.
It's scary to me how many people are delighted about what's happened. I mean, before our interview, I watched a clip of the Young Turks and David Pacman both talking about this, and particularly the Young Turks. I mean, the way that they try and present themselves as objective journalists, and then he goes, yeah, well, conservatives don't feel any empathy, and it's just like, how can you even pretend to be in any way objective when you talk in that way? And neither of us is conservative. We just try and talk to people who we may disagree with, or but you can't talk about people in that way and then present yourselves as objective. But they used exactly the phraseology that you talked about, something along the lines of, well, of course violence shouldn't be used, but, and that happened in that video a couple of times, and I was like, do you understand what you're saying? Anything you said before the word "but" doesn't count, So obviously there is a large group of people who are very happy about you being treated in this way.
Yes.
Why do they see you as such a threat, do you think?
Because I'm a decent professional person who has quite reach in my writings. Like many people who have been very critical of Antifa have been confined to either blogs or YouTube videos, whereas my writings have been published in the Wall Street Journal, and the National Review, the New York Post, and I was with Quillette. And so it's just like, and with what happened to me on the 29th of June, it kind of woke up some of the politicians to start speaking about Antifa's extremism, which hadn't been done before. So I am perceived as a threat, understandably, to them, because for so long they've just been receiving pretty much only favorable coverage. And the fact that now there's somebody who's can't be relied on to provide favorable coverage consistently, who calls them out on their actions, and who has a reach that I have quite a large reach on Twitter. The places that publish me have large amounts of people reading it. They see that their control over the narrative is slipping a bit, and actually they really depend on that control over how they are perceived, because their actions and ideology is so extreme that they really do have to rely on those who are willing to whitewash and rationalize the things they do. And once that gets challenged, whoever's doing the challenging needs to be taken out by any means necessary.
Andy, you strike me as being a very brave person in the truest sense of the word. Your life could be a hell of a lot easier if you didn't do this. Why do you feel the need as a journalist to put yourself in the firing line and to put your body on the line as well?
I have a lot of journalist friends who told me, Andy, you should just move on to write other things, like the pile-on that happens every time you do one of these things, the scrutiny on every single detail, every single word you say. Like, it's just not worth it, living under that type of pressure, and on top of the threats of violence. And I think I've refused to be cowed, because the things that Antifa has been doing to me for months is to terrorize me into silence. And I think with the crowd beating on the 29th of June, that was meant to attempt to permanently silence me, and they failed. And I refuse to give them that type of victory. Of course, moving forward, I'm much more wise about how I cover events, and that I unfortunately no longer believe that the Portland police are willing to uphold the law, for example. So even if I'm covering Antifa right in front of the police, I was naive to think that the police would actually protect a citizen just in a public space. So there's things that have changed, but I'm sticking on this. There's other things I write about that makes people on the far left and the left hate me. I write about hate crime hoaxes quite a bit. That was originally how I kind of started receiving some notoriety earlier this year. And that challenges and weakens the Antifa narrative, which is that we are living in such an oppressive, dangerous time that violence is justified against the oppressors. And the oppressors can be anything from regular Trump supporters to those truly on the far right. But that's a huge spectrum of people that they all oppose with the same hatred and violence. So I'm going to continue to speak out. I recognize, and I want to be a better journalist too. The mistakes that I made, that I've had to correct. It's embarrassing every time that happens, but any journalist with integrity recognizes that and works to improve on it. So I have goals that I have to work on for myself moving forward. At the same time, when something's an outright lie against me, as some of these headlines are right now, they're outright lies. And, I'd just like to say my legal team is aware of it, because I think some of the claims against me rises to the level of libel and defamation.
Mm. Well, I was going to ask you, you're here in London, in England. We had something not similar, but we had some protests recently. Do you think we're going to see more of this across the world? These running battles between people on the two extremes?
The issues that we're seeing with Antifa more recently is really kind of confined to the Anglosphere. Antifa activism in Germany is a kind of entirely different thing, because they actually do have a history that goes back decades of this group. And some of the ideas that are from America, I notice, are bouncing off to the far left militants in Britain. What I was encouraged to see was that the London Metropolitan Police, even without having any of the heavily militarized gear that you see American police have, they were able to contain law and order. For example, last weekend when there was an Antifa demonstration against Tommy Robinson supporters, they were marching on the street, so they had disrupted traffic. And before they could really do that for much longer, the police just surrounded them in such large numbers that they couldn't do anything, and the police pushed them to the pavement. So they could no longer disrupt traffic. Some of them were carrying some small sticks that had sharpened ends. That was taken. And it seemed like, because the police are quick to act, they're not emboldened to see how much they can push. Because in Portland, it wasn't like right away that they were attacking people in the street. It was like, okay, first we're going to take over the streets and we can do it. Secondly, some of us are going to bring in bats or brass knuckles or small knives and bear mace, and we get away with it. And the next thing is we're going to start using it. So, like the incidents of political violence in Britain that I've seen have been much more isolated and small. I mean, I know that some of the controversial political people who ran as MEPs not too long ago were targeted, but that's the violence that I saw there wasn't anything like what we continue to see in Portland. So I think that as more attention is brought to the dangers of normalizing political violence in liberal democracies, I think police will naturally face more pressure to do more. Unfortunately, in Portland, our police commissioner is also our mayor, so that may be the one exception. But what I'm really concerned about is just that the wider public will accept and encourage those types of violent actions because they believe that it's for a better cause or a good cause. I think that's extremely damaging to how citizens relate to one another. It's like, if you erase the line between thoughts, ideas, and actions, like that, I mean, there are many parts of the world actually where, depending on just the idea that you hold, you can be put to death for it, either by the state or through a mob lynching. And so it worries me that many influential people here who have benefited from the rights that come in, the civil rights that come in liberal democracy, that they are, in a way, working to weaken those sort of those rules that are codified into law, but as well as expected between one another. That's what I'm concerned about.
And do you think we're going to be able to, because at the moment, I mean, maybe it's just, the effect of the internet. You look at the internet, everybody seems to be more polarised than ever. We seem to be bracketing ourselves into certain camps. Do you think that we're going to be able to heal this division, or do you see it just becoming worse and worse?
Well, in your country, you're dealing with Brexit now, and it does seem like it's getting worse and worse.
Thanks for that, Andy, mate. Nice one.
But you have, I mean, your prime minister, as hated as he is by some people, I also see him doing good effort to be a unifier. In America, it's a bit harder in that, the president, that's Trump is Trump, that he hasn't changed a bit from the campaign days in 2015. And so there are going to be people who will try everything they can to exploit this polarization because it benefits them politically. And so I'm a bit more hopeful about Britain than I am about America in this regard.
Well, I don't normally do this before we ask our last questions. Do you think Trump's getting re-elected?
Yes.
So do I. It's interesting. All right. Well, let's do our last question on that happy note.
On that happy note. So the question that we always ask, Andy, is what is a one thing people aren't talking about but actually really should be talking about?
Well, this is sort of the paradox. There's a lot of people talking about social justice, extremism, and craziness in the universities, in the American universities, for example, but also with some campuses in the UK. I mean, your student union is particularly outrageous. I think what's not being looked at in this particular instance is that those ideas that were formerly confined to certain disciplines in university, they now have outlets to be mainstreamed across the rest of society.
Yeah, we read The Guardian.
Yeah. Well, that's it. And this is why we talked about the contract that I turned down. That's why I turned it down, because I'm going, it's going to bleed into real life. all this social justice stuff is going to bleed into real things. It's not just going to stay at the university, because these people are going to grow up and they're going to become politicians, judges, journalists, and they're going to spread all this crap. And that's why I think people who are sane need to stop it and say something, which is what you're doing. So all the best of luck to you with it. We wish you well. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Wear a helmet or something at least if you do go into these places. Joe Rogan said to you should bring some big guys with you, but you're clearly not planning to do that, are you?
No, I can't reveal my reporting tactics, but there are many ways when you get creative of how you can cover a demonstration without necessarily putting yourself there.
Okay.
Okay.
He's going to use drones. All right. That's a good idea, actually. Drones.
Yeah, it is. It's a good idea.
In Russia, this is completely irrelevant to what we're talking about, but in Russia, they use drones to fly over all the politicians and oligarchs' mansions to show how these people are living. So they infiltrate the whole thing with the drone, and then they do a whole report about how it's all built using stolen money.
Well, there you go.
So there's an idea for you, Andy. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, Andy. We really appreciate your time. As always, follow Andy. We'll put the thing in the bottom of the video on Twitter. He puts his reporting there. Follow us at TriggerPod on all the social media, and we will see you in a week from now.
And also as well, please leave us a nice review on iTunes. If you're enjoying the podcast or the show, tell another person. If you're worried about it, just tell them quietly. And we will see you next week. Thank you so much.